Would you be giving away too much free content on your podcast? And could that be the reason why your sales are slowing down? I get this question all the time, and so got it again this week. So I thought about creating a podcast episode just about that. If you are a small business owner and an entrepreneur or a professional who is maybe wondering if they're giving away too much free content on the show, this is the episode for you. And by the way, I'm Anna. I'm the founder of the Podcast Space, which is both a podcast and a company. Here, I teach you better ways to use a podcast as an effective tool for your business and to grow your online influence. So let's dive right away into this episode. So is it true that a podcast can hurt your business by creating too much free content? And if it's not the case, then who qualifies for each side? Of course, this episode is going to be covering what I always talk about, which is it depends, because it's down to a lot of the nuances of the timeline and the context. So if you are a business owner and you're looking at the immediate term, yes, it probably will impact your sales. But the truth is that no podcast will give you sales right away. Like, this is something that I talk about here in the podcast space all the time, that podcasts are not great at audience building. It's audience nurturing that podcasts are really good at. And for that, you need time. So if you're looking at growth in the long term, absolutely go for as much free content as you can. And here's why. Because you're building an online brand. And for most of us, the topic we're talking about is normally bigger than our online influence. And so we need to make almost like a digital footprint of who we are, who we serve, what we do with our business, because a lot of people, they're risk averse. You have people who will be investment prone, but for most people, especially women, they're very risk averse. And so what it means is you have to build a trust factor, right? Like, people need to see you talk about time and time again about things. And if you go for surface level content, what's going to happen is that people are not going to be quite sure if you are the person with the right skill set. So you need to ask yourself, if your show is a tool for your business, how does a podcast fit in your business? Do you have products to sell? Do you advertise them on the show? This is something that I always talk about, that when I am working with podcasters and we're looking through their marketing funnel or the podcast processes that they have set up, that is one of the main things. Normally, there's a disconnect between the type of content that they're creating right now and basically the services that they offer. And so basically you need to create a need and an understanding that you're serving clients who have a specific problem, right? So here in the podcast space, the problem that I solve is probably so far you have not been able to use the podcast effectively to grow your business and your online influence. And so again, what do I do with that? I have podcast power hours, I have podcast coaching, I have instant access courses that teach you all of these things. And so looking back, this is when you need to have a little bit of a step back and assess what you're talking about right now, right? So is there a misalignment between what you offer or the level of expertise that you're talking about and the type of podcast offers that you have? So let's say if you're talking about stuff that is very advanced, but you only serve clients with a very limited understanding of the topic, that may be the reason why you're not getting clients. So is it comfortable the way that you're talking about what you're talking about and not making that effort of realizing and getting into your listeners' heads and thinking, what are they struggling with? How can I guide them? There are some easy ways which I will discuss on the episode, but I think that we really need to understand what is the listener path and also how are they buying what we sell? So one of the main issues that I see time and time again when I'm doing podcast audits is kind of going through the path of a new listener. So if you do talk about your products and services, but there's no links in the show notes, or even if there's, for instance, your podcast is not on your website, or there's like missing pieces in between the two, we're putting a lot of effort in our listeners, right? Like, we're just telling our listeners, hey, like, it's up to you to figure out how to get access to that, right? So we need to make sure that there's no disconnect. And I worked with a client who had that exact problem. She was telling me, I want the podcast to be lead generation for my coaching business. But the reality is she never talked about the type of client she was serving. She rarely did any solo podcast episodes. She was also pivoting her company. And so in that sense, there was a lot of limiting beliefs where she was like, well, I cannot talk about it until quote unquote, I'm ready. I cannot talk about it until I have like all of these website ready, when in reality, all you need is one way to get payment from your listeners, and number two, how to make them get to that information, right? So the listener path needs to be without obstructions. And by the way, links need to work. Another situation that I'm just remembering is a podcast host that I listened to. Her name is Denise Duffel-Thomas. I mentioned her a couple of episodes ago. And she mentioned in an episode that it was about 2020, how she's a millionaire. She wanted to pay it forward. And so she told her community, hey, if you have products and services that are pretty much like easily, like almost like instant access, send me the link and I'll buy them. And that's my way of supporting everyone during the pandemic. Well, she then created a podcast episode exactly about how a lot of links, more than she expected, were either broken. The buttons were not necessarily very obvious that it was to purchase, or there were some broken links in order to pay, expired pages, all of these things. So I would advise you, if you are thinking about, hey, maybe I'm actually somewhere where my podcast isn't bringing in leads, it may not be a content strategy issue, it may be a path issue. And so if you need help, of course, we can do that together. But really, sometimes it's not the big things, it's the smaller things. And we all think about like, oh my gosh, maybe my messaging isn't clear. Maybe, like I don't have access to the biggest, best tools. And normally it's just broken links and stuff like that, honestly. In reality, I would say probably like maybe not 90, but like 70% of the time is small things like this, and we're just always constantly like doing, and we don't take time to stop and assess what is not working. So another reason why, like the sales may be not coming through is that the podcast is bringing awareness into what you do. And so when you're creating your products and services, if you keep shifting what your niche is, what your product is, what you're doing, not only you will break the links, or you're constantly in procrastinating branding, right? So you're constantly updating the links, changing this, and you're not actually spending your time doing work that is actually useful for growing the business. So like doing outreach or preparing content strategy instead of just doing something because it's 5 o'clock the day before and you have to talk about something. So really focusing on sticking with what you're doing is going to be really helpful in creating awareness about your brand and helping also future listeners go back and realize that yes, you're the person to serve them beyond the free content, but also at the same time, like just create that good search engine optimization. If we constantly change links and everything, Google's going to be like, what's going on here? So we want to make sure that we're doing that. So now that we kind of assess like what we need to consider when we're using the podcast as a tool, these are the reasons why the podcast may be cannibalizing your sales. So when your experience isn't actually pretty extensive on a topic and you don't have client experience, and so if your expertise is very limited, or if your experience level is very basic, there may be a lot of overlap between what you do and what you're talking about on your show. And that may be the reason why you're not getting sales, is that basically you just don't have enough to offer just yet. And so for clients, it's almost kind of like, well, if I'm getting all of this content through the podcast and you're not giving me a ton of context, I just feel like maybe I want to keep listening to the show because I'm not 100% sure if you have the expertise to work with me, right? So another one is if you, and this is very common, is that people will do podcast episodes and they will turn those episodes into content that is on a course. But the problem is that there is a lot of overlap. And so basically the instant courses or the very quick access is basically the same thing. And while yes, there will be some audience that will still want that because maybe they never listened to the podcast or something like that, you may struggle to make sales because the sales page does not communicate in extensively what your expertise is. Just remember that the internet is free. And so sometimes being too vague on our episodes, someone can go on YouTube and literally Google for hours, days, months, and get access to that same question, to the answer of that same question, And so basically that's when you're like, well, how can I personalize what I'm doing, right? So then another one that is basically when the sales are being cannibalized is when the clients that you're serving, they don't necessarily require a lot of customization. And so when they're looking at listening to your show, if you're giving a lot of in-depth knowledge and they don't require customization, you're giving all they need, right? And then lastly, there's freebie seekers everywhere, all right? And so on episode 62, I'm talking about how to turn freebie seekers into downloads, episode ideas that are going to get you discovered, but also money-making ideas. And this is where you have to really understand if some people keep asking you for free stuff and they never make it to sales, you have to ask yourself some of these questions that I just did, right? Like maybe your expertise isn't in depth enough, or maybe you're just too afraid of giving away free knowledge, so you're very vague, or the clients that you're serving, again, don't require necessarily a lot of customization and they're okay with the free content. Now, how do you avoid having this clash of free content versus sales? Amy Porterfield always says that create free content based on the why the audience should do something and sell the how you do something. And while this sentence is great, it's really hard to basically do this, right? Because one, you want to be helpful. And normally how I do this is by giving a lot of context, a lot of client examples. And so this is something that if you've listened to more than 10 episodes of the show, I am always talking about client examples, things that I've done in the past, and also how in my own company, how I'm doing things. So those things are not necessarily replicable. However, they will give enough context for the listener to go, okay, this person has experience in that field. This person has been doing all of these things that I recognize as they have the skill set, the right skill set to help me, or they have the right values to help me get to where I need to, right? Also, for instance, there's no clash if you're providing something that is like an experience, or if you are a speaker, right? So basically people want to be there in real time with you, whether that's digital or that's virtual. And so, for instance, I was just at Podcast Movement and I did a talk, and a lot of the things that I talk about the talk, they're part of my show. I've talked about it a lot. However, there's new audiences and also the same audiences that have heard me talk about this on the show. They were still there, right? So there's no overlap into the free content cannibalizing the sales when you're providing something that is also experiential. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, like highly customizable offers, things like coaching, things like done for you. This is the type of product that, you're never going to be able to replicate on a podcast episode, so you're okay. And I also want to invite you to think about, there will be people that will be paying to basically have you just bounce off ideas with you. And that is something that still happens. Now, just know that there's the people who won't pay, but the people that will pay, even if you say the same thing. And I had clients meet up with me on coaching sessions, and they were quoting me from podcast episodes. They're like, oh, you said this on the episode. However, expand on that situation with my context in mind, right? So this is where people still benefit from hearing you talk about things in depth, and they're still willing to pay for your expertise, your skill set. Another thing that I wanted to remember is that there's power into that, like getting to talk to you when you're creating a podcast for a while. I did book a ton of calls with my podcast super fans, and they always talk about like, oh my gosh, it's so great that I'm talking to you. This is awesome. I've been following you for a while, and just getting to talk to you is just great. So again, I had people that were super fans. Some booked podcast power hours or booked me in coaching engagements, and other people haven't done it or will do it in the long run. So That's what I'm saying about like really looking at the long term and just building a consistent brand. They will buy eventually, right? And if we are constantly worrying about, limiting beliefs and scarcity mindset, then yeah, we're not going to be getting any sales because we're just too afraid, gatekeeping a ton. And the last one of this is that I think that we have to remember that with ChatGPT, personality, customization with interaction with another human being will be more valued than ever. So if you want to be in an industry for the long run, creating content that is helpful, that actually solves problems and isn't very like vague is the way to go, right? Because at the end of the day, if I was to type podcast content strategy, podcast marketing, podcast coach, there's thousands of people that do the same thing that I do. However, there's only one way that I do it. And so I have to believe and trust that just like I do business with other people in any other way, just like if you have a product out there, you're going to be able to get customers, even though there's a gazillion other stores that do the same thing. So I hope this episode was helpful. This is a very quick episode because I get this question all the time. And just out of podcast movement, I felt like I needed some time to process everything that happened. And I was like, what is a burning question that I get all the time that I know as we are about to hit the second quarter and potentially you're feeling a little disheartened because maybe the podcast isn't bringing sales? Well, I invite you to talk to me on social media, to book a discovery call. You can find the link below. It's free. It's 30-minute conversation, and we can see where you're stuck and how we can work together to get you unstuck in 2024. So if you need help, the show notes include all the ways to work with me. So please don't be shy and book that call. I will see you in the next episode and keep creating content that's imperfect but moves you forward. Bye.